of the morning, which is the Green Bay Packers. Moving on from another long-term star as they look to reshape their roster in 2025. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers was not on the Green Bay Packers the last 2 seasons, but he is a guy who will most likely retire, a member of the Green Bay Packers who has won Super Bowls and MVPs with the Green Bay Packers. And then there's another name that has had plenty of success in Green Bay that at one point was viewed as one of the best corners in the NFL and is now an option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's Jaire Alexander, who is set to be released by Green Bay today after the Packers were unable to find any trade suitor over the last couple of weeks. He hits the market. He's 28 years old. Of his 7 seasons in the NFL, he's only been able to fully complete 3 of them. He's coming off of 2 7-game seasons. He did have 2 interceptions in those 7 games last season, and he still, when healthy, is one of the best corners on the field, but he does come with a lot of injury concerns. Your thoughts on Jaire Alexander? Do you look at him as a guy that the Pittsburgh Steelers should go after? They obviously have Joey Porter Jr., they have Darius Slay, they have Corey Trice, Brandon Eccles, Beanie Bishop. Not that Jaire would play on the inside, but young names outside of Slay that seem to be there as key developmental pieces for the Steelers defense. It's not like Jaire Alexander's old. He's 28 years old. He's got a lot of football left in him if he could stay healthy, but he does come with those concerns. Do you look at him as a guy the Steelers should go after? Would you have conversations with Jaire, and does he fit the Steelers defense?
I have questions about the overall fit and how effective he could be with the Steelers defense. But that being said, I think you have to at least talk to him. It sounds kind of funny to even say, but they could use extra injury insurance, as as funny as it is to say about Jaire Alexander potentially being the person that fits that, coming off of 14 combined games over the past 2 seasons. It doesn't really sound like the most logical option as someone who could come in and fill in those spots. But if he is okay with coming in and maybe competing for a spot, maybe the number 2, maybe the number 3, ideally, and someone who can help just kind of patrol on the outside, I think you have to have those conversations and see if he's open to it. If he's not, it's very understandable. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. He has, when he is at his best, like you've already mentioned, he is so talented and he has an eye for the ball and he's a ball hawk. So, it's tough to say what the market is for him several hours after the news comes out about his potential release and who might all be interested as well. But you got to have those conversations at this point and then, just see. And the other thing is, if he is open to it, I'm more confident in him being that guy, who is the number 3 on the depth chart than Corey Trice, than Brandon Eccles, then like there's a lot to be desired. There are positions to be taken, and there's certainly nothing locked up in terms of the Steelers secondary aside from Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr. So if someone's interested in coming in to compete, sure. I don't know if Jaire Alexander is willing to be take that step back already at 28 years old.
I agree, but he might not have an option. There will be teams that look at him, I'd imagine, a guy of that caliber. But if we're going to be realistic, like any team that goes out and signs Jaire is taking a shot at this guy. They're taking a risk. There is some sort of very negative outcome that comes along with this. I look at him as a Trey White from Buffalo, who signed with the Ravens, who before that I believe was with the Rams, and was a guy that before the injuries was a top tier corner. This dude was a stud. He was one of the best in the NFL. He was making plays. He was a starter. Injuries piled up. He gets released, and all of a sudden teams are looking at him going, okay, we're not going to just sell house for this guy who can't stay on the field. We have to be realistic about the situation. And when you're realistic about the situation, maybe he's a guy that has to earn his place on the roster. If that happens with Jaire Alexander, which I can't predict that it's going to, but if it does, if he's a guy that teams look at as a reserve piece, I agree with you. The Steelers are the perfect fit. I like Corey Trice a lot, to be honest. And I like Brandon Eccles too, but I like Jaire Alexander more. I like Jair Alexander more as a starter next year if he works out to replace Darius Slay than I like Corey Trice or Brandon Eccles. And if the Steelers are looking at it saying Joey Porter Jr. is our long-term guy, and next year we're going to have to draft somebody super high, but we're also going to try to trade up to get a quarterback, and we're going to need a wide receiver and maybe another offensive lineman on top of other positions that you got to look at and say, Minka's coming to the end of his deal. Nobody knows what's happening with TJ Watt. Alex Highsmith's nearing the end of his deal. Patrick Queen's nearing the end of his deal. Cole Holcomb's nearing the end of his deal. All these guys are going to be either replaced or resigned, and the Steelers are going to have to make decisions. This is one less decision that you maybe have to make long term. And if you have Jair in the roster already and he plays all right and stays healthy, and then you say, look, you come back, you're a starter next year, I don't mind that. And at the end of the day, if Darius Slay hits a wall during the season and at 34 years old, 33 years old, something like that, he is no longer the guy that he was a year ago, which could happen at any moment. You have a guy who could step in and be that replacement option for the Steelers. And while I'm confident in Darius Slay, that is a risk, and a risk that the Steelers have to address. So I agree with you. Like, I think he's a great number 3 option for the Pittsburgh Steelers if he's cheap. He's got to come cheap if he's expensive at all, which I find it so hard to believe that playing 14 games in 2 seasons is going to get you a big contract. I think he's a 1-year deal, not a vet minimum, but couple $1 million at most. And I mean, if I'm the Steelers, I feel very comfortable with that. What's your long-term outlook on Corey Trice? I feel like that's the equation here. Like, that's the missing pieces. If the Steelers, who they are confident in Corey Trice, but he's a 7th round pick who's dealt with injury concerns. What's your outlook on Corey Trice?
I think if you are feeling confident that he is the long-term answer, either as the number 2 or something more than that, you're playing a very dangerous game. I understand, and I agree with the Steelers' whole approach with secondary, or overall approach, where they like really covet length and they really covet like the ability to like be like sticky on the wide receivers. And Trice and Porter Jr. certainly fit the bill. They're hulking cornerbacks compared to someone like Jair Alexander, who's I think 5'10". But so I understand the makeup, the sort of like overall search for that type of physical player. But I don't know if Corey Trice, he's certainly not done enough on the field for long enough to show that he is ready to take that on, or is just one sort of hot stretch away or a few games away, a little bit more of experience away from taking that next step. I still don't see that. I think he has all of the tools and the potential still, but it's just not, I'm not convinced. If the Steelers are, if Omar Khan is, if Terrell Austin is, that makes me feel kind of questionable about that. So it's all, that's why I feel it's so out in the open. There's so much competition to be had at training camp and OTAs and all of this stuff coming up, because there's lots of potential again, but no one has their spot cemented in the secondary, even Darius Slay. So
yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
shaky.
And that's
how I feel.
Shaky is the word. And this is the time of year where you make those moves because you just don't care. You're not sitting around going, oh, we got to be the nice guys. Corey looked good at OTAs. No, you make the moves where you're trying to go win a Super Bowl. And I think Jair Alexander is a name. I wouldn't say watch, but he's a name out there. And we'll move on after this, but do the character concerns bother you? Do you think that hinders the Steelers' potential to go after him? I mean, this is a team that, they have made it very clear they are not messing around with bad personnel, bad personalities anymore. Does that bother you?
Potentially. I think the Steelers have kind of thrown caution to the wind in terms of that right now. I think the goal has prioritized championships now. It's about bringing in maybe the best players for the next month or so to see what gives them the best combination and mixture. I mean, I hate to say it, but you brought in someone with a concern to be your starting quarterback. So if we are going to sweep that under the rug, then I think we have to be okay with maybe another personality that doesn't mesh well and has some questions in their past coming into the locker room. But also Rodgers might have some insight as a former teammate of his. it could benefit him in that regard to have someone who's already familiar with him in the organization. So I don't rule it out with the character concerns, but
Yeah.
again, we're playing a dangerous game here where it's like, okay, I thought it seemed like we were going down a road, right, of
Yes.
clearing house, setting a new standard, getting back to tradition, or getting back to this, mindset that Mike T is all about in the organization that comes, from Rooney on down. But for a championship, it seems like maybe we're taking a right turn a little bit. And so, no, character concern isn't writing anyone off right now. It has to be pretty egregious.
I agree. The Steelers moved on from George Pickens because they knew what was in house. They knew what they were dealing with, but they obviously have their blinders on when it comes to outside guys, like other teams do, like every other team does. They think they could fix this guy. They could fix George Pickens. They could fix Kenny Pickett. They could fix whoever, the Steelers think the same way. And then they show up and it doesn't happen, but
Right.
they feel the same way. All right.